tonight is the final night before we'll know for sure whether or not De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis will be all-stars like they deserve to be. And in their final on-the-court opportunity to make an argument for themselves, the two of them, with the addition of Malik Monk, dominated in San Antonio. You are listening to Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season long today, presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10, and hopefully by this time tomorrow night, Thursday night, we will know for sure that De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis are all-stars. We will have the satisfaction of knowing that the NBA got it right by putting both of them in the All-Star game. Now, I think Domantas Sabonis is an absolute lock. He's like 99.9%, and that 0.1% is about as unfathomable as it gets. If Domantas Sabonis is not an All-Star, like at that point, nothing makes sense, and they should just cancel the All-Star game altogether. But De'Aaron Fox, he's far more fringe than he should be. And there's far more debates around De'Aaron Fox, not so much because of what De'Aaron Fox is doing or not doing, but more so just because of the amount of talented guards there are in the Western Conference. And I completely understand that. Except, while we typically take numbers first and foremost into account, box scores, averages into account when it comes to this award or this recognition for this season's accomplishments, not the past accomplishments. Doesn't matter how many times you've been an all-star, doesn't matter how popular you are, it's this season's accomplishments. If you're going to lean as heavily on numbers as we typically do in the past, I think you're doing a disservice to one of the biggest gold stars on De'Aaron's resume that cannot be ignored. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But first and foremost, let's talk about what Fox and Sabonis did tonight in San Antonio as their closing argument, for lack of a better term, for their opportunity or their case for being all-stars in the Western Conference. Domantas Sabonis tonight, 34 points. He had 32 of them by the end of the third quarter. 15 of 20 shooting from the field. 11 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. That is as full of a stat line as you get, Mr. Sabonis. Domas was dominant in this game. And a couple of games ago, I asked for Sabonis to give more offensively, to look to score more than he has in the past. I think it was after the Toronto game that I asked for that. Well, over the course of this road trip, especially with how the Kings have been struggling from the perimeter, Sabonis has been looking to score. And in tonight's game in particular, nobody could stop Domas. Nobody could stop him. Domas, I think, had 20 points by the end of the first quarter, or 20 or 21 points by the end of the first quarter. He was absolutely dominant, and I pity defenses when Sabonis is like this, because Domas is such a great passer, an elite passer, really. We know how well he can set up his teammates, and how when you're guarding Domas, you can't just keep an eye on what he's doing. You have to keep an eye on passing lanes. You have to communicate with your teammates and keep an eye on where he is going to go with the basketball, not to mention how he can use his size, his strength, and his body to screen shooters, not just from their man, but also from a help defense from whoever is guarding Sabonis. It's already an extremely difficult task to try and handle Domas when he is just passing the ball and setting up his teammates like he loves to do and like he's been known for so far in his time in Sacramento. Not to mention keeping him off the glass is a nightmare. You already have to deal with all that. When he is that threat, plus he's scoring at the rate that he's capable of scoring, when he's having a big offensive night like he's had tonight, when he's such an efficient scorer and he's so strong around the rim and can get to position and really be a nightmare there in the paint. Even if you throw double or triple teams at him, it doesn't matter because he can either score through them, he's patient with his pump fakes around the rim, or, like I just said, with his passing ability, he will find the open man. At that point, I pity defenses. I don't know what you do against Domantas Sabonis at that point. Your only hope is for him to start missing shots, which we know how efficient of a shooter he is, or you get him in foul trouble on the other end of the floor. Or you get him to get some offensive fouls from time to time by selling contact every once in a while, which the Spurs tried to do a time or two in this game tonight. I don't know what you do. Like when Domantas is that determined to score, and when he has the opportunity to score, and not just that, he's hitting mid-range jumpers and even capable of stepping out to the perimeter like he's shown more and more this season. There's nothing you can do. I mean, that stat line is absolutely ridiculous, those 34 points. Very exciting. And what's great to see is in addition to the 34 points from Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox was right behind him with 31 points, 13 of 23 shooting, 10 assists, 3 steals, and a block. So your two stars in this game tonight, Kings win 119-109. Your two stars combining for 65 points. Both of them shooting extremely efficient from the field, not needing to dominate the ball all game long to reach those 65 points, while also filling up statistical categories outside of scoring. The 11 rebounds for Domas, the blocks, the steals for both of them, and then, of course, the 10 assists for De'Aaron Fox. For you to score 31 points and still distribute the way that De'Aaron Fox did in tonight's game, that is monumental. So you get this performance from Fox and Sabonis, not just them saying, hey, look at what we're doing as individuals and look at these stat lines in yet another win on the road. Again, the Kings are the only team in the Western Conference with more wins than losses on the road. And somehow their defensive rating on the road is significantly better than at home. I don't know how to explain that. It's just inexplainable with this team, but that's been the way it's been for the Kings so far this season. Not only did the two of them shine as individuals and have put together such impressive stat lines in their box score that not even the box score watchers who claim to watch Kings basketball when they're getting involved in arguments about all-star games and who deserves to be an all-star and who doesn't, and they just judge it based off of numbers and box scores and don't actually watch the Kings. Here's a case where if you watch the Kings, you would have seen how big of stars both of them were individually, and you would see how the box scores support their stardom. But it wasn't just each of them showing what they could do as individuals. It's the tandem showing what they can do. And that's what's been consistent with De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. Even with the two of them playing a significant amount of time when the other is off the bench, or on the bench rather, because Mike Brown has to stagger his minutes between the two and have one of them on the floor, or tries to have one of them on the floor at all times. It's the rotation that has worked for the Kings so far this season. Even with them not spending every moment on the floor together like other tandems do or typically do in the NBA, they can shine as individuals and then come together and dominate together, whether it's one of them scoring while the other is assisting or their two-man game opening up opportunities for their teammates. They are a tandem, and they deserve to represent the Sacramento Kings, the third seed Sacramento Kings, as a tandem in the All-Star game, representing one of the best teams, a top 3 team in the West at this point. To say one deserves to get in over the other is malpractice, in my opinion, and games like this are just another example. But let's dive in a little bit deeper about De'Aaron's All-Star case, because Domantas Sabonis, like I said, is a lock. Like, he's going to be an All-Star tomorrow. It's like written in the stars, right? He should have been a starter. De'Aaron Fox is competing with Damian Lillard. He's competing with Devin Booker. He's competing with, even though it's kind of not this exact same position, but to some extent, spot-wise, Anthony Edwards, right? The big debate that I've been having all day with many, whether they're Blazers fans or just NBA fans or Dame Lillard fans on social media, has been about Fox's case versus Damian Lillard's case. And to me, if the NBA were to put Damian Lillard into the All-Star game and leave Fox out, that would not surprise a lot of people based off of Lillard's history and the fact that he's averaging 30 points and 7 assists a game, right? I get that part. I understand that Dame has done enough this season, or has the resume this season, to be an all-star. But his resume is not more impressive than De'Aaron's. He's not done enough compared to De'Aaron Fox and De'Aaron Fox's team to be selected over De'Aaron. If the NBA were to pick Dame Lillard over De'Aaron Fox, here's the message that they're sending to De'Aaron. It would be more valuable for you to get individual recognition and the millions of dollars of compensation that comes with being an all-star. It would be more beneficial for you. It would help your case for you to stat hunt and to prioritize your scoring and your individual numbers over the success of the team. Because while De'Aaron is still putting up really good numbers this season, it's not a career year for him scoring-wise and assist-wise, because it doesn't have to be. De'Aaron is capable of taking a little bit of a step back, not having to be the the one-man show that Damian Lillard is. And I give Dame full credit for what he's doing with the Portland Trailblazers, except I don't give him credit in this sense. The Portland Trailblazers are not even in the play-in. In fact, they're 12th in the West. They're 2 spots out of the play-in. Now, I understand the gap between where they're at in 12 and the play-in spot, 9, 10, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's not that big. I also understand the gap between the Sacramento Kings at 3 and the Blazers at 12 is not monumental either. I get it. I understand the West is completely stacked. It's condensed. Anybody has a chance at this point in time. But the award is for where the Kings are at this season and where De'Aaron Fox is at this season at this point in time. And the Sacramento Kings are in 3rd. You cannot give, to me, you should not be able to give an all-star bid to a player because he's averaging 6 more points a game and 1 more assist per game than De'Aaron Fox, but is almost 10 spots lower in the standings and not even in the playoff or play-in picture. I understand All-Star Game is individual recognition, but to me, in addition to numbers, it should be just as important to take the story of a season or to take the context of a season into account when choosing All-Stars than it is to just take box scores and just take numbers. Numbers are important. I understand that. So is the story of the season. So is giving proper recognition to the players on a team that are either overachieving or are going beyond our expectations. And the Sacramento Kings are absolutely going beyond and playing beyond our expectations to this point. Some will say they're overachieving. That's fine. I don't necessarily need to look at it as a negative. I'm just saying the Sacramento Kings, nobody expected them to go from a team that was struggling to make the play-in to being in the 3rd seed right before the trade deadline and hopefully remaining in that 3rd seed, remaining in the 3rd, 4th spot, which is home court advantage in the opening round of the playoffs by the time we actually get to the All-Star break, which is 7 games from now. That has to be taken into account, especially considering where the Sacramento Kings have been over the last 16 years. That context is essential. And to ignore that and give it to Dame simply because his numbers are better when he's taking more shots and has more opportunity on a bad team, to me is malpractice, especially considering, now I know De'Aaron has never averaged 30 points per game in his career, but when he was averaging 25 points per game and 7 assists per game, and he was a really good player winning multiple Western Conference Player of the Week awards, he was never really considered for an all-star bid. Why? Because the Sacramento Kings weren't winning enough games. Dame Lillard, sure, he put up, did he put up 40 points tonight? Sure, he put up like 50 or almost 60 points the other night. Maybe he broke 60. I honestly don't remember. Dame Lillard is an absolute star, and in reality, both Dame and Fox deserve to be in the All-Star game. But Dame does not deserve to be in the All-Star game over De'Aaron Fox, just because his numbers are better. Context is essential. De'Aaron deserves to be in there. He also deserves to be in there over Devin Booker, who is now targeting a comeback, I think against the Brooklyn Nets or something, coming up here in a handful of days. And Devin Booker has only played 29 games this season. I know his numbers he's averaging better numbers than the Kings, than De'Aaron Fox is. But the Suns are below the Kings. Now, granted, the Suns might be below the Kings because Devin Booker's been out with injury. I understand that. De'Aaron Fox has been healthy. He's been playing through it. He deserves to be there. Devin Booker doesn't just deserve to get in there because he started off the season well and he's Devin Booker and he's been there before. Name recognition should not play a factor in all-star selection for this season. And this season, you cannot deny what De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis are doing in Sacramento. The Kings had an honorable big 3 tonight. So it was De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis who combined for 65 points, right? Then there's Malik Monk, who scored 22 points, shot 8 of 13 from the field off the bench, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals. And Malik Monk probably has one of the best missed dunks of all time now, because he tried to absolutely end the career of Jakob Poeltl and destroy the NBA as we know it with his, I don't even know how to explain it, like spin, cocked back, tomahawk jam that just barely popped out because of an unfriendly rim, and he was fouled. That would have been absolutely a dunk of the year candidate. I know John Morant has done some ridiculous things and some ridiculous dunks in Memphis. It would have been right up there with that. That dunk, like, I audibly screamed very loud here in the ABC 10 studios when I thought he was going to throw that down. But for the Kings to get 87 points, 87 of their 119 points from three guys, that's actually very unlike this team. Three guys scoring 75% of the points the Sacramento Kings had tonight in tonight's win. There are a lot of teams that rely heavily on big threes, right? And no, Malik Monk is not part of the Kings' big three. The Kings don't really have a big three. They have a big two at this point. Hopefully Keegan Murray will maybe become that big three or an acquisition for the Kings maybe this offseason or at the trade deadline or next year or whatever. Maybe they'll form a big three eventually. As much as I like Malik is not a big three. As of right now, he's struggling to solidify his spot in the sixth man of the year conversation. But these last two games from Malik have been excellent. I have no problem with the Kings leaning heavily on three guys to get this win tonight, especially considering how much they're struggling from three-point range. And I'm going to get into those three-point struggles in a second. How many times this season have the Kings won a game with six guys, even seven guys in double-figure scoring? The Kings have won a majority of their games this season as a team, which is fantastic. Not a negative thing by any means. That's awesome. But there are going to be nights where Keegan Murray struggles like he did tonight. Kevin Huerter struggles like he did tonight. Over the last couple of games, Kevin Huerter struggled. Harrison Barnes provided 14 points, and outside of Malik Monk, you really got no production from your bench, period. Like, there are going to be nights where you need to lean heavily on your top guys to get you through. And I give credit to Malik for not just passively leaning on Fox and Sabonis with the nights that they were having, but contributing to it when the Kings absolutely needed that. To me, it shows the range of this Sacramento Kings team. More often than not, the way they're going to beat you is five or six guys, maybe as many as seven guys, having really good offensive nights. This team is capable of that. There's so many guys on this team that can go off at any given moment. Hell, there are even guys that aren't really part of the rotation right now who have dropped 30 in a game. And I'm talking about Terrence Davis against the Brooklyn Nets, right? There are so many players on this team that can go off at any given time. We know this about the Kings offense. So when it's great to be able to rely on so many different players and a team offensive success, some nights that offense is just not going to be there. And how many times have we asked for De'Aaron Fox in particular, but the Kings stars to step up and carry the Kings through when the team offensively is struggling? De'Aaron and Domantas, but especially De'Aaron over the last two games, has done that. And the Kings have won both those games despite their shooting struggles. Really, the Kings are struggling shooting from three-point range this entire road trip. Tonight, they were 8 of 27, 29.6%, rounded up 30%. Not good. Typically, if the Kings score less than or make less than 10 three-pointers, they're in trouble. The Kings are shooting 26 of 90 from three-point range so far during this road trip. 3 games, 26 of 90, that's 28%. If I were to tell you, regardless of the opponent, going into this road trip, that the Kings would start their first 3 games 26 of 90, 28% shooting from three-point range, you would have told me at best the Kings are 1-2. At best. And I honestly probably would have believed you. Again, regardless of competition, even if you, like me, thought that the Kings should dominate most of this road trip because of the competition that they're facing. The Kings are so reliant on their outside shooting that if that is not there, this team really struggles. But the Kings are 2-1 despite that poor shooting. 1, because their stars are stepping up when they need to. And 2, because they're doing a really good job taking care of the basketball. And they're scoring on the inside. Like they're despite the three-point shooting percentage being bad, their field goal percentage has been really solid and consistent. And the Kings are averaging just 10 turnovers a game over this 3-game road trip so far. That's very impressive for a team that likes to play as fast and as fluid as the Sacramento Kings do. And we've seen at times the Kings can turn the ball over a lot in a hurry, and that usually leads to some bad things for Sacramento. Great to see this team overcoming bad shooting nights, overcoming games where something that they usually lean on, is not there, because that's what good teams do in this league. We've seen the Warriors come into Sacramento, have bad shooting nights, and still beat the Kings, right, over the course of their dynasty. Good teams find ways to win, even on nights where their shooting isn't good, or maybe their defense isn't all there. They're not playing up to the standard that we expect for that team. And a lot of times they do that because they don't make mistakes like turning over the basketball, and they have stars to carry them through those struggles. Check both those boxes for the Sacramento Kings over the last couple of games. Like I said at the beginning of the show, today's episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the only app you need at your Super Bowl party. America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America. FanDuel, if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. If you download FanDuel now, you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. What that is you'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown in that game. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. And best of all, you can get paid for your winnings instantly. And of course, it goes beyond just the Super Bowl, although this is Super Bowl time, of course. They have great betting on all Sacramento Kings games, future bets, side bets, prop bets, things like that, all throughout the NBA and so many other professional sports. Join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we've dabbled in this here or there, but it's time to really start the conversation about Mike Brown winning Coach of the Year. Look at what he has done with the Sacramento Kings team. Now, it wouldn't surprise me at all if it goes to someone. I mean, it could go to Mike Malone with what he's doing with the Denver Nuggets. Like there are a lot of deserving candidates this year for a multitude of reasons. Teams that are better than the Sacramento Kings at this point in time, and I understand that. What Mike Brown has done for this Sacramento Kings organization is something that 11 other coaches, I actually have to see the exact number. It's definitely 10. Double digits in coaches have not been able to do since Rick Adelman over the last 16 years. Mike Brown has turned this team around. Let me give you an example. The Kings now have 29 wins through 50 games, 29-21. Game 50 last season, Luke Walton had already been fired. Alvin Gentry was the Kings head coach. The Kings lost Game 50 in Atlanta, 121-104. So through 50 games, the Kings were 18-32, and they were in the middle of a 7-game losing streak. That is an 11-win improvement through 50 games from last season to this season. That is monstrous. An 11-win improvement. If that were at the end of the regular season, which it might be more than that for the Kings, that is incredible for any coach. And that should be at the absolute top of the argument that we make for Mike Brown. But it goes just beyond that. Also, by the way, the Kings are 1 win shy of last year's win total. They won just 30 games last year. They're at 29, and it's February 1st. Wild how quickly the Kings have turned it around and how much better this team is this year. But it goes beyond that, right? Mike Brown is a coach. He's not just a manager. And you can see that with how he interacts with his players. And it's not just something that you have to be in practice to witness. Although we've seen it plenty of times in practice, whether it's his quick timeouts that he calls, that some people might find annoying, but they're effective for the Kings to get his point across. I don't like what we're doing here to start this quarter or coming out of this timeout. I'm calling another one until you get it right, damn it. I don't care. I got these timeouts. I'm going to use them. It's not just that. It's the camera catching tonight. Keegan Murray, who had his worst game offensively of his career so far. Keegan Murray is pulled aside, and with a camera 3 feet from them, is getting a coaching moment or lesson from Mike Brown about what he did wrong on that defensive possession in front of everybody for everybody to see. And this is not the first time. It's probably like we're probably reaching double digits at this point, that Keegan and Mike have had these kind of coaching moments. It's probably well over double digits with where we're at in the season. And it's certainly not the first time that it's publicly been talked about. Plus, we see Mike Brown and his ability to call out his players, whether it's in practice or during games or post-game press conferences or whatever, and they respond to that. Like, I watched that clip, and it just puts a big smile on my face, because even if Mike at the time is not happy with what his rookie is doing, he's trying to hold his rookie accountable for the mistake that rookie made. Keegan soaks up every bit of that. Think about 5 years from now, when Keegan Murray's in his 6th season in the NBA. Hopefully he's still a Sacramento King, and he's part of a big three here in Sacramento, and hopefully he has a ring or is competing for a ring here in Sacramento at that point in time. Keegan is going to remember these lessons that Mike Brown, who is hopefully 6 years from now still his head coach, but is going to remember these lessons that Mike Brown and his coaching staff are instilling in him and take those with confidence, knowing that he's grown and knowing how he has had to grow to get to the point that he's at as a successful, I believe, long-time starter in the NBA. I think Keegan Murray is going to have a 10 to 15-year career, hopefully all as a starter for the Sacramento Kings. He's that good and he's that efficient. And I think that's the projection for Keegan Murray's career. And so much of that is going to be possible and made better by these moments between he and Mike Brown, even during a timeout in front of everybody when maybe it might be embarrassing. I don't know Keegan. I don't know if that's an embarrassing moment for him or not. The entire world saw it, and as far as I understand from the reaction that I saw from Kings fans, everybody is fired up about it because they know Mike Brown knows what he's talking about, and Keegan's going to listen to it just like so many players on this roster are going to listen to it. So not only should Mike be Coach of the Year because of the win total that the Sacramento Kings have, and will hopefully have by the end of the season, not only should Mike Brown be absolutely a finalist for Coach of the Year because of how quickly he's turned this team around, Mike Brown should be Coach of the Year because he came to an organization that had no sort of winning culture, very little accountability, typically a losing mindset where guys would not buy in or would check out pretty easily. He came in and in less than a year turned that around drastically in addition to the Kings' win total. He and his staff did that. To me, Mike Brown has I call them the 3 R's. They're the 3 traits that make him successful for the Sacramento Kings and should be absolutely taken into account for the Coach of the Year. 1, reputation. Mike has a incredible reputation around the league. We talked about that reputation a lot when he came here to Sacramento. We talked a lot about the defensive side of the ball and how his reputation was as a defensive coach, but we really just scratched the surface on the reputation that Mike Brown has as a teacher of the game of basketball, as someone who understands and learned clearly a lot from his time serving under Steve Kerr in Golden State and winning championships in Golden State, coming here to Sacramento and instilling those championship tendencies in Sacramento and those championship expectations. And I don't mean that from like the team winning a championship right away, but the Kings players playing at a level that you would expect from a team that wants to eventually be champions, holding them accountable. Mike has brought all of that to Sacramento and implemented that immediately. Reputation. Number 2, in order to implement those lessons, you have to have respect. In order for your players to be able to be pulled out onto the floor in the middle of a game and listen to what you're coaching, what you're saying, what you need, in order for your players to hear you call them out publicly on the podium and say they need to do better rebounding the basketball or better defense or better scoring or whatever it is in front of the media that is distributed to millions of people in NBA fandom. In order to take that and not check out or not turn on your coach, or in order for Mike Brown to do that and not lose his locker room, he has to have their respect. And he's had their respect from day one. And anybody who did not fully respect him and respect themselves quickly learned to respect him and respect themselves. And also, he got everybody to buy in and fully commit to giving their all by signing a contract that has a copy up in the practice facility and a contract that is up in the locker room saying that you are all in. Kings have followed that. Reputation, respect, and now results. He's combined the first two into a team that is third in the Western Conference, 29-21 through 50 games. Like I said, a 11-game improvement year over year through 50 games. That's incredible. He has the results. Now, it might be a bit premature. This is why these are regular season awards, right? And we have to take the full regular season into account. If Mike Brown and the Kings, for whatever reason, knock on wood, decide to go on a little bit of a slide here and limp through the end of the regular season and maybe fall a few spots in the playoffs, still make the playoffs, but fall a few spots, yeah, you have to take that into account too when it comes to the Coach of the Year. But if Mike is able to continue what he's done for the Sacramento Kings team to this point, if the Kings they finish the season third or fourth, 11 games better than last season, which would be 41-30. I think they're going to be better than that. So let's say almost 15. Let's say 15 games better win total wise than they were last season. Multiple games over 500. If they're able to continue doing this, 9 games. What are they? 8 games over 500. Yeah, you best believe he should be if he's not the Coach of the Year, he's number 2. He's got to be number 2, or at the very, very, very least number 3, and even that feels like a snub. Reputation, respect, and results. Mike Brown has all of it here in Sacramento, and the Kings are finally better because of it. This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? You have to give Built Bars a try. We just got through the holidays. Now we're into February. So if you're a month into your New Year's resolutions, especially if those resolutions are to eat better, to stay healthy, maybe to put on pounds of muscle or to lose some weight or overall just feel better about yourself, Built Bar can help you continue with the momentum that you already have. And hopefully, Built Bars have already helped you get through that most difficult first month with those New Year's resolutions. Why are Built Bars so important? Whether it's their Built protein bars, their granola bars, or their marshmallow puffs, you can still satisfy that sweet tooth that we all have, and you don't have to sacrifice that sweet tooth in order to accomplish those health goals that you have in mind. That's because these Built Bars they come in so many different flavors. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, but they're significantly better for you than the candy bar that you can compare them to taste-wise. We're talking about 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein in your average Built Bar. Yeah, those are real specs, real numbers. That's how good these Built Bars are for you. Their protein-infused marshmallows, their puffs are incredibly delicious as well. And now you don't need to wait to get your Built Bars in the mail after ordering off of Built.com. Go to Walmart, go to Sam's Club, go to the pharmacy selection. You can get a box right now. Give them a try there. And then once you have the flavors that you really like churro or brownie batter, you can go on to the Built website and you can make your own custom boxes with the flavors that you love. The mint brownie bar is my favorite flavor, by the way. Give them a try. Check them out, Built.com. While we're at it talking about All-Star Awards and Coach of the Year awards, Monte McNair damn well should be in the conversation for Executive of the Year too. Now again, his job, or the context of him winning that award, we're still missing the trade deadline, which is in 7 days from now. And I don't expect any kind of fireworks at all from what Monte McNair is doing. I personally don't believe that he needs to have the fireworks in order to pull that off. His fireworks happened last trade deadline, and I know that's last season, so it doesn't really count towards this year's award. And this past off season, which should count or does count towards this season's award. Like, he's done a tremendous job, which is why he just earned a 3-year contract extension. But with how the Kings have turned it around, as much credit as we want to give to Mike Brown, who was Monte McNair's hire, and as much credit as we want to give De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, and the rest of their supporting cast, we have to give credit to the guy who put them all together, and it is working, especially considering what he inherited here in Sacramento. So if Mike Brown's going to be up for consideration there for Coach of the Year, put Monte McNair in the conversation for Executive of the Year. Like I said, trade deadline in 8 days. So many of you are sending me your suggestions for deals or players for the Kings to go out and target. Keep sending those to me if you want. This is the most, I should say, least interested I've been in a trade deadline in a long time because the Kings are not super reliant upon it. If Monte can make a minor improvement to the roster, he's absolutely going to look to do that. And rumors are he's already looking at a player or two like Matisse Thybulle, right? I do not expect Monty to go crazy by any means, and it is not the end of the world by any means if the Kings come out of this trade deadline without making any kind of significant move. I think Monty's going to look for something that barely moves the needle. And I know there are players out there that Kings fans are really taking interest in and are really excited about, right? I get it. To me, like Mason Plumlee, for example, a big man that absolutely would improve and help solve the Kings' problem of a backup big, right? But we're talking about someone who's going to play 12 to 15 minutes a night, someone who's going to back up Domantas Sabonis. And I understand that Mason Plumlee can do some of the things that Sabonis does, but Sabonis and Nikola Jokic are two of the most irreplaceable players in the NBA, period. And the reality is, once the Kings make the playoffs, even if Mason Plumlee is on this roster, Domantas Sabonis is going to be playing 40 minutes a night in the playoffs. Now, you hope he doesn't have to play 40 minutes a night for the remainder of the season for the Kings to secure a playoff spot, which is where someone like Mason Plumlee would make a lot of sense for the Kings to go out and get. But I see a lot of people very excited about Plumlee and the idea that, oh my God, like this is what the Kings need. He is the missing piece. We're talking about someone who's going to have a very minor role as the 7th, 8th, or 9th guy off the bench. And you know what? Those are the guys that Monty McNair should be targeting and thinking about right now. Because 1 through 6, I would say 1 through 7, if you include Trey Lyles, completely solidified. You're good. And none of those 7 should change, in my opinion. But that's just me. But still, we can talk about it. Of course, the trade deadline coming up. We'll have more great content about the trade deadline and on trade deadline day, depending upon what the Sacramento Kings decide to do. On tomorrow's Locked On Kings podcast, very excited to have Sports Illustrated's Howard Beck on. I'm sure I'll ask him any rumblings he's hearing about interest that the Kings have in some players. Howard is going to share his thoughts on the Kings to this point, his thoughts on the Kings and their playoff chances. And then we're going to actually be recording that interview tomorrow morning. So we're going to be recording it before the All-Star reserves are officially announced. So I'm going to have to dance around that a little bit because we won't have the context, and I don't want the podcast to be outdated by the time that announcement is made later on in the evening. So we'll just talk to Howard about what he thinks about the seasons that Sabonis and particularly De'Aaron Fox are having, and how all-star caliber they are. I hope you'll join me for that on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Kings. Appreciate you joining me on this episode of the Locked On Kings podcast. Kings 2-1 so far in this 7-game road trip. Coming up next, Indiana Pacers. I expect Tyrese Halliburton is back. I expect the Pacers to look for some significant revenge after what the Kings did to them, really embarrassing them in Sacramento. Domas' return to Indiana, I think that will have an impact on how he plays. Very much looking forward to that game and the remainder of this road trip. So can't wait for those games. Hope you'll join me in the post-game episode for those. Hope you'll join me on the Howard Beck podcast tomorrow. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.